I am less guilty these days for the art I consume than I was when I was younger. It made much more of a difference what people thought of my choices in pop culture. The older I get, the fewer guilty pleasures I have. These days, they're just pleasures.
This is Third Song In, Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek.
This episode is about guilty pleasures. And we probably ought to start out by defining what we mean by that term. And when I say we, I mean you. Define it.
It's funny because I actually struggled with this a little bit. I think an easy one is like super popular, almost to the point of embarrassing artists that you listen to. I think Taylor Swift would be an example, but she's also really good. So I could see a justification. I remember one, I think it was Maren Morris. I sent you when we were doing a playlist, and I sent you one of her songs. And later I went and looked it up, and like she had like 80 million follow, like some crazy number. And I'm like, holy crap, she's popular. What am I doing sending that to Tom? And I'm like, I don't care. I like the song. So that's one level. I think another might be like overly sentimental stuff that you enjoy listening to. You put down, I know you're going to talk about it, comic books. I mean, that's seen as something that should be much more of a young person's interest. At least it used to be. Nowadays, not so much, especially if you go to one of these Comic-Con things. Um, and then I am going to talk about it, something that shows how juvenile I am. I realized I love songs that have curse words in them. Like they may not even be great songs, but I listen to them all the time. And then if I'm sitting in the car with someone who, may have, some reservations about fuck being dropped every 3 seconds, I might be like, let me skip this song. So that's not a great definition. Those are some examples, but
Yeah, but
that's what
that's
we're
just
here
it is.
for.
Yeah, people use that term all the time, and I'm not sure how they define it in their own head. As I was trying to look at stuff and figure out what things I've listened to that at least in the past I would consider a guilty pleasure, it did seem to come back to things that were very popular and generally speaking, very popular just with the demographic that I'm not part of. So, like you said, or you kind of intimated, I think stuff that's really popular with 20-year-olds. Maybe I shouldn't find so much pleasure in listening to that song or watching that movie or whatever it whatever it might be. For me, the songs that I thought of, and it was mainly in terms of songs, but also I think we're going to end up talking about some movies and maybe some TV. The guilty part for me seems to come from liking something or continuing to listen to something that starts out very popular, and then you'll see kind of a backlash, and people will start saying that no, it's a ripoff of something else, or it's gotten so popular, or sometimes it has to do, I think, with the audience that it attracts. Like I said, generally speaking, if you get, if high school kids love something, then maybe I shouldn't love it. But the fact is sometimes I do. And I think we have a list of songs and other pop culture that truthfully kind of withstand the test of time. So if you don't, you may justifiably be feeling guilty about listening to a song, but on the other hand, if it was put together well and if it was performed well, generally speaking, it was popular for a reason when it was. And just because I don't hit the necessary demographic doesn't mean that it's not good art. And that's kind of almost everything I think we'll end up talking about today falls along those lines. You mentioned already, as I was trying to throw some stuff onto the outline, at this stage in my life, I would say my guiltiest pleasure is comic books. And I wrote an essay about it not long ago that's on the blog, that I kind of left comic books for a period. It must have been 30 something years, right around the time I started in high school. I stopped reading and collecting comic books. And that's probably the time when most people stop, right? They're becoming an adult, they're becoming more mature, they kind of throw away their childish things. And that was one of them. And it had probably, in my case, more to do with just being busy and the things that come with high school, particularly if you're in sports in high school. There's just not a lot of time to be reading other stuff, particularly comic books. But I will admit that even then, one of the reasons that I stopped reading comic books was because it makes you look like you're a little kid. And I wanted people to, perceive me as being more mature. I'm sure than I was, but certainly more, more mature than I was when I was 10. And that held pretty firm for years and years. And then when my boys started getting to the age where they would get into comic books, I would take them to comic book shops. And I slowly started realizing, A, I still like that stuff. B, it's a legitimate art form. It's a legitimate form of culture, pop culture at the very least. And frankly, comics are a lot better than they were when I was 10 years old. They're great artists, great writers. It's a lot of fun. And it is a completely different kind of art than reading a novel or watching a movie or looking at, visual art in some other form. The combination of words and pictures is actually can be a really tremendous way to tell a story. So I say it's my guilty pleasure. That's because I'm 58 years old and I still go to a comic shop once or twice a month. And when I say comics, I buy graphic novels that are, literary in quotes and are supposed to be, the next thing. But I also pick up, the most recent issue of Batman, for example, because they just are still telling great stories. And I know I'm not alone in that, because if I were, then the Marvel Cinematic Universe wouldn't be a multi-billion-dollar industry. So I guess I feel less guilty because I know other adults do this, and I see people my age or near it at comic stores all the time. But it was a guilty pleasure when I was 13 or 14, just before I stopped doing it. And I guess at this point, it's the one thing I don't necessarily just come right out and tell people, yeah, I was at the comic book store the other day, because I'm afraid they're going to look at me funny.
That's okay. I don't have to go to the comic book store. One of my most embarrassing moments, it was a long time ago. I was at the grocery store checking out, and I looked to my left, and they had one of those little Archie comic books,
Yeah, sure.
and I bought one.
Yeah, what the hell? Although you probably did, and you probably put it underneath the bag of lettuce or whatever else was on the thing. It is so funny to me. I mean, I don't feel embarrassed when I'm in the comic shop. But I admit,
Oh, yeah.
almost every time I walk out of the comic shop with a couple books in my hand, I kind of look both ways, and just to see who's there and who sees me coming out. But like I said, the older I get, hey, if you like something and it entertains you, why should you care necessarily what other people think? And the reality is I don't think people look down on that form of entertainment the way maybe they did when 20 years ago.
I think it's becoming more of an adult area. I mean, there's some pretty hardcore graphic novels and
Yeah,
otherwise. And I don't know if the Japanese, is it manga? Is that the form
yeah.
of art? I know that my son Eli is really into it. But yeah, you got me into comic books. And to this day, I still get graphic novels. I just read it's probably a little bit older now, but it's the rewrite of the Joker and Harley Quinn. I'd have to go and look at the name of the author, but a friend loaned it to me. It's really good.
Yeah,
Uh,
there are literally writers, and it's really writers more than artists for me, but there are writers that I'll read any series they get into. So, there's a guy named Tom King who's a tremendous writer. I think he's a former CIA agent, actually. And he's written for Marvel, he's written for DC, he's written for independent publishers. I think he's self-published some stuff out. But I mean, he'll write straight on, he just, I think, is finishing up a run on Wonder Woman, which I never ever read as a kid. I wasn't interested in that particular comic book, even when I was really into superheroes. But he's just got a very adult way of writing these stories. And I'll basically read anything that he writes, regardless of whether it's superhero or some kind of horror genre or whatever it may be. He's just really good at it.
no, I fully agree. I don't think you should be ashamed of your comic books.
Like I said, there's plenty more I can be ashamed of.
Oh, I know.
So you
So,
mentioned
yeah, go
songs
ahead.
and curse words, and as usual, I think your focus was a little more on music than mine was. What do
Yeah,
you,
and I think the thing that would define it for me, and I don't know if we do this as much anymore, is if you're driving your car and the windows are down and you're cranking up the music and you come up to a stoplight, do you turn the volume down? Well, not to be courteous, screw that. Do you turn the volume down because you're embarrassed about what's coming out of your speakers? So that's the definition, I think, of a guilty pleasure. And
do do
go
you
ahead.
remember the scene from Office Space? He's got like hardcore gangster rap. It's set in LA. He's stuck in traffic. He's got hardcore gangster rap blasting. He's got his window open and he sees a guy, like a homeless guy with a sign walking by. He's a black dude. He can see him in the rearview mirror approaching him, and he slowly turns down the music till the guy walks by him. He kind of nods at him, and as the guy walks, gets a car length away, he turns it back up and starts singing along with the song. That's a great definition
Yes.
of guilty pleasure.
And that, like when we were in college, I started listening to, I guess, I don't know, it's gangster rap, but Ice-T and some of the other music inspired by Ice-T, Ice Cube. And I wasn't deep into it, but I try, like, that stuff was edgy and new at the time, and I wanted to try to listen to it, but I would turn down the volume when I was at the light because
Yeah.
just wasn't, it was, I wasn't embarrassed about the music. It's just that here's this white dude, dorky guy listening to rap like it's but now it's more heavy metal. Like when I can go in a variety of ways. As most of my picks, you can tell I usually go with the slow, depressing shit. But sometimes I need that more cathartic stuff. So I'll go back to some of the hair metal, like Crocus, or Accept, or even like a White Snake. Like some of that stuff was just like, pump your fist and make you feel
Right.
good. I don't know. I still turn that stuff down. It's like, look at that 60-year-old dude almost cranking heavy metal. What a doof.
That's that is actually, you hit on the perfect definition of guilty pleasure as far as music is concerned, because I'm trying to remember, and I think this was me. Maybe I saw it in a movie or something, but like, I think a great example of that would be if you were listening to "Walking on Sunshine" by Katrina and the Waves, right? It's the opposite end of the spectrum. But if I would crank that if it comes on my on my radio or on my streaming list. But if I'm stopped in traffic and I'm cranking that, I probably turn it down if somebody pulls up next to me.
Not listening to Katrina and the Waves.
Not that.
I don't
It's
know
not
where you got that
me.
idea. And then I guess the other one is, and this might be just being nice. Like I said already, I listen to a lot of songs and I could name them so that we can get the beeps going. Country as Fuck,
Yeah, yeah.
Fuck You by Whiskey Shivers. I'm still debating if I'm gonna use one of these songs for my playlist pick, even though I have another one listed right now. But so those, like when those, because a lot of these songs don't have just like one example. They have multiple F bombs being dropped. So I probably turn those down as well. And I guess the thing is like why? Like I was thinking about last night, it's like, why do I still enjoy curse words? Because it's not always that the songs are great. They are usually good. But it takes it to another level when there's a good use of curse words. And I wrote a blog about it a long time ago. I think I'm still a kid at heart. I'm a juvenile. I giggle over stupid stuff.
Yeah, no, I could relate to that for sure. I know
You know,
exactly what you're saying. And that would definitely also fall within your definition, because you would turn that down if somebody was approaching the car, just because you don't want them to know you're reveling in swear words.
that might be a good place to segue to our recommendations that fit with this theme. And as a reminder for this season, for each episode, episode 1, we did 1981, episode 2, 82, and so on. So we're doing a year from the 1980s, which was our heyday, graduated from high school, going to college, all that fun stuff. With this being the 6th episode, our year is 1986. So what's your recommendation for guilty pleasures from 1986?
This is, first of all, not music. It is a film that was directed by John Carpenter that came out in 1986 called Big Trouble in Little China. And I think at this point it is probably a cult classic. And I'm not sure that it's perfectly aligned with guilty pleasures, but it starred Kurt Russell, a young Kim Cattrall, beautiful Kim Cattrall. It is a crazy ass movie about a guy who's just kind of one of those characters that just kind of wanders the earth. He drives a truck. That's the Kurt Russell character, and he finds himself in this crazy situation in Chinatown, I believe in New York. And he ends up fighting wizards and monsters, and he has to save the girl. And it is kind of a classic John Carpenter movie from the 80s. The looking back on it, the special effects are kind of hokey and hard to watch, but it is one of those films that I will that people call it's one of those movies that I get Shawshank by, if you know the term Shawshank, which means that if it's on TV and I walk by the screen and see it, I will almost always just sit down and watch it to its end, regardless of when I came into the movie. I've probably seen the movie 4 or 5 times minimum, and I really enjoy it. The reason I think it's a guilty pleasure, frankly, is because it's not that good. The acting isn't very good. Kurt Russell it's like it's just prime Kurt Russell. He's just a smart ass, and he's just that guy you wish you were. I'm sure the first time I saw it, I wanted to identify with him just because he seemed so cool. But he also, he had flaws, and he was not the perfect hero or anything, but he was just really funny and really kind of ballsy. And I liked it for that reason. But if you really pay attention to the movie, it's just not really that well made. And that's kind of how I feel about a lot of John Carpenter stuff. I do think it is a guilty pleasure in that sense that if somebody came to you and said, "What movie have you seen, more than 5 or 6 times in your life?" And if I have to admit one of those movies is Big Trouble in Little China, I feel like it might reflect poorly on me.
You couldn't reflect any more poorly with me, so you're good.
Fair enough. That's why I talk to you about this stuff, and
Exactly.
why I do a podcast that nobody listens to.
I agree with your assessment on all accounts. Kurt Russell was the epitome of cool in this movie. I think we talked about it yesterday. Very similar to his character in Escape from New York,
Yes, yeah.
badass. But this one is a little more over the top even. And I think that was, 80s, that was the thing. There were movies like this that were just there to be bombastic and fun. And, in hindsight, acting wasn't that great, but they're still enjoyable to watch. And this is a perfect example. And as such, I decided I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. Egg burritos with sour cream. When we talked yesterday, I said I'd probably only give you 3, but how well it aligns with the theme, I'll give you a bonus point. Nice work.
Nice. Nice.
This one I think is a guilty pleasure for almost a different reason. I think it's a well-made movie, good acting, great scenes, like memorable scenes. So instead of just describing it, I will tell you what it is. The Hitcher, starring Rutger Hauer, who's the greatest ever, C. Thomas Howell, and I'm going to blink. She's got the 3 names. I got to get them in order. Jennifer Jason Leigh, who was C. Thomas Howell's girlfriend, I think. Quickly describe it if you haven't seen it. If you haven't seen it, shame on you. Rutger Hauer is a hitchhiker. C. Thomas Howell makes a really bad decision to pick him up. And he doesn't get killed by him, but he probably wishes he was. In fact, he does wish he was, because the rest of the movie is Rutger Hauer torturing C. Thomas Howell by framing him for all these other bad deeds that he does. And one of my favorite scenes, is when they're in a diner and sitting across from each other, and Rutger Hauer is basically, telling him he probably wishes he was dead, and he puts coins on his eyes while he's sitting there. Like C. Thomas Howell is just so beat down by what's been going on. So it is a slasher movie, essentially. It's dramatic. I said it's good acting. I don't know that it qualifies as something we should feel guilty about, because it's quality cinema. But the fact that we watched it about 50 times.
Yes.
Day after day after day, to the point where when it was due to go back to Blockbuster, we decided not to return it. We ended up having to pay for The Hitcher. I think I bought my own version later, but it remains one of my favorite movies, and it's my recommendation. for 1986. So quick story. I was going to pick an album because Tom published a blog today when we're recording this and talked about the death of the album. So I was like, you know what? It's a good idea to go with an album. So I did a quick look at albums, had a couple in mind. I'm like, yeah, let's look at movies real quick. So I looked at a list of movies from 1986 and I saw The Hitcher. And I started to text Tom and say, you got 5 minutes to make your choice for the 1986. But then I saw he already had 2 or 3 choices, as he always does. So I'm like,
Right.
screw you. So I messaged him and said, The Hitcher. The Hitcher.
I think you said The Hitcher. Boom.
All right. What's your rating?
My rating for The Hitcher is, and must always be, 5 out of 5 egg burritos with sour cream. That's despite the fact that it is, as you said, technically it's a slasher flick. It's the kind of horror movie with jump scares that I generally don't like, and we talked about this in a previous episode. Not the kind of movie that I would watch these days, but as you said, I mean, we watched it at least 50 times, and it is a movie that Shawshanks me, although you don't see it very often
No.
on cable or anywhere else. I have a digital copy, and it still scares the hell out of me. Like you said, it's a well done kind of horror slasher movie. But I do think that it maybe because of that, because of the genre, that it counts as a guilty pleasure for you, only because, again, if someone asks you what your favorite film is, I'm going to say you pick The Hitcher in your top 3, and people are like, yeah, did you ever see Chinatown or Godfather? But hey, it's what you like, and it's what I like too. And frankly, I would put The Hitcher up in my top 5 or 10 myself. And I love that movie. And like as you related back to when we first watched it, or I should say started watching it, I think my rating's probably tainted a little bit by that. But we used to love to sit and watch that movie with Joe Pay or make other people watch it for the first time. It is a classic, and I do think that's a good recommendation. 5 out of 5.
Nice. And to answer your question, no on Chinatown, no on Godfather.
Never seen him at all, or just not on your list?
Never seen him.
Wow.
The second one is embarrassing.
Wow. Yeah. Truthfully, so is Chinatown. In fact, I think you like Chinatown more than The Godfather, to tell you the truth. You got work to do, my friend. You got to watch those movies. You really do.
All right. I will watch them before the
Yeah.
end of this season.
All right.
I'll start with Chinatown since you said I like it better.
I think you will. I think you like. It's Jack Nicholson, and it's prime Nicholson. It's great. I think you would like that movie. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to take a moment to just take in the fact that you haven't seen either of those movies.
All right. Well, you're taking a moment. I'm going to introduce the next segment.
Cool.
We have a new segment for season 5, halfway through the season, so it's not new anymore, but where we highlight the unknown unknowns. So artists, movies, books, TV shows that we think are worth knowing, or people knowing a lot more than they currently are. So we're trying to bring some attention to the vast audience that we reach with this podcast, hoping that our highlighting of their works, their credentials, their values, will encourage others to check them out. Tom, it's your week. What do you got?
It is. Yeah, we are alternating for this one because we're trying to search for gems. Takes a little longer, I think, necessary to find somebody that qualifies. I think I did. The artist's name is Phil Cody. He's a kind of a country folk type of singer. His lyrics are really, really sharp. I think they're very intelligent. They're very, very funny sometimes. He's got a real nasally voice that, in my mind, reminds me a lot of early Dylan. His songs are a little more specific than Dylan, some of Dylan's stuff. But it does remind me of kind of early Bob Dylan right when he went electric. He currently on Spotify has, or did have, when I looked, 327 followers. I think that's a pretty small number for a guy who's been around. His first album was released in 1996. According to my research, the most recent thing he's put out, at least formally as an album is something called Cody Sings Zevon, which is an album of Warren Zevon covers that came out in 2014. But I did try to search around a little bit. He's got a Facebook page. He's got a Bandcamp page, which is where I think he marketed this most recent album, which most recent is 10 years ago. But he does appear still to be touring. He appears to be playing live. I couldn't find any new studio releases after 2014, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go back and listen to what he has put out. I think he's got 4 full-length albums out. My favorite, it came out in 2001. It's called Big Slow Mover. I just think he is an outstanding Americana type artist that I don't think anybody knows about. I know you would be at least slightly familiar with a couple songs because I've thrown some on playlists over the last 10 years or so. When I looked him up, there was a reviewer that compared him to Peter Case and Pete Droge. I think that's accurate, but I do feel like he's got his own sound. I think he's really kind of a unique voice. And I'm as with most of these recommendations, I'm a little surprised that he isn't a little more popular than he is at this stage of his career. I made Spotify's number of followers 328 yesterday, and I would recommend that you look up Phil Cody. You can find him on Apple Music, on Spotify, on YouTube Music. I think he's a great kind of hidden gem of an artist.
I just looked on YouTube Music. He has all of 63 followers. So I bumped him up. So
Nice.
I increased by 163rd.
Yeah. Also born in Cincinnati, by the way.
I saw that. I did see that. So
Yeah.
definitely got to check him out.
And he does sing. It feels to me like he sings from a Midwestern perspective. Whatever that means, to you, to me, it means that everything is kind of really grounded and like I said, his songs are very detailed. Not necessarily story songs all the time, but he like any good writing, it all comes, I think, in the details, and his lyrics are very detailed and really draw you in. I think that brings us to Post Facto.
It's a mistake. It's a mistake.
So Post Facto is our opportunity to make corrections or add to information we've provided in earlier episodes. And Chris, do you have anything to add or correct?
Well, what I have to add is that I still can't, despite multiple efforts, to find the name of the artist that sang the alternate version of a song called The Very Best. I recommended that on our episode with Botini.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Willie T. Taylor's version is what I emphasized.
Mm-hmm.
There's a version that's much darker and sadder, more sad, whatever it is. I am searching everywhere and I can't find it. So at some future Post Facto, I'm going to find that thing. And if there was such a thing as a live intrusion of our podcast, I would do it, because when I find that thing,
You're
I'm
breaking
gonna let
in.
everyone know.
We have breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. Chris figured out who that fucking guy was.
So I don't technically have anything other than the fact that I'm failing on my search skills to find that other song.
It's something of a pre-post facto.
Exactly.
It's a post facto teaser.
It is.
All right.
And
well,
again, I'll be searching media so I can have breaking news for the whole world.
My post facto is that I listened to the band Layden Valley, who you recommended. I think it was our 4th episode of this season. And it took me a little bit to get to the songs. You had recommended, I think, 3 individual songs. It's a band that we found out also had an album from, I think, 2021. I haven't gotten a chance to go back and listen to that album, but I wanted to listen to the 3 songs that you recommended. I can't remember because you kind of graded them out. One was better than the other 2. And I don't know if what I'm going to say agrees with that. But what I can say is I really like the song Angeline. The song Desert Rain that you recommended, I thought was okay. And I didn't really care for There Was a Light. And There Was a Light, probably the reason I didn't really like that is the reason that I'm not real high on Layden Valley. you mentioned that there are really great harmonies with this, and I think it's just two people. I think it's a duo, if I'm not
Yeah, it
mistaken.
is. Yep.
They harmonize really well together. Their songs fit, or their voices fit together very well in their songs. But truthfully, a little too well. They're a little too smooth for my taste. It feels a little bit like mid '60s folk, where that was the draw. That's what people wanted, was people with really beautiful voices that harmonize well. And I think that describes Layden Valley, but it probably is a reason that I won't have them in a rotation anytime soon. As I said, I did like the song Angeline, and I will certainly listen to that again. And I'll listen to any new albums they come out with and see how they grow as a band, assuming they do grow as a band. But I thought this was a good place to report on that. When you recommend something, I actually fucking listen to it, and I come back and talk about it. You should do
Nah.
that. Okay, next.
And I don't disagree with your assessment. I think it's why one of the songs, and I think it was one you didn't like, they sang with another band who also has,
Yes.
I think, nice harmonizing. So I thought that broke it up a little bit, but yeah, I could definitely see where it could wear on me a bit. But I'm trying sometimes with, although I didn't do it this week, with my staff picks to pick something that's a little out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
So
No, and I think, again, I think I have referred to it as a recommendation, and I guess it is, because everything we do is kind of a recommendation.
correct.
But that's the way you presented it, and I think you're right. By the way, I think There Was a Light was the one they sang with another group, and I don't know that group very well either, so I don't know if that's consistent with their music. But again, really smooth, really kind of well harmonized, for lack of a better term.
So that's going to bring us to the next segment in our episode, which is staff picks.
Just around the corner from you.
This segment, Tom and I try to replicate the experience of going to a record store or DVD store and looking up on the board and having a list of recommendations from the staff that work there. Sometimes you'd find someone you trusted, so when you go back, you'd be like, hey, I like that choice the last time. So whenever Tom does it, I say that, but then I never go and listen to his stuff.
Right. I'm not the guy on the staff that he relies on for his opinion.
No.
Which is weird, because we have a staff of two.
We
So
do.
I don't know who the fuck else. So you're going to listen to your own stuff or watch your own stuff as well.
I am.
So my staff pick for this week is a television series on Netflix. It is season 2 of The Old Guard. Interestingly, The Old Guard is based upon a comic book, based upon a graphic novel, a comic book series about a group of immortals. It's a little Highlander-ish. I know you recall that movie. If our listeners recall the movie Highlander, where there's some people that live forever. The original season is probably 3 or 4 years old now. It starred Charlize Theron, which was why I started to watch it, because I'll watch anything that she's in. It was really good. The first season was excellent. I really loved it. Like I said, it's a group of 4 or 5 people, and very similar to Highlander, there's someone. Well, I guess I shouldn't say it's similar to Highlander, but there's someone new who just learns that she's immortal. So it's kind of like the flashback scenes in Highlander when he figures out he can't die. The twist is that she discovers this ability, I guess, and at the same time, the other immortals in the world know that she's come of age and that she's showing this gift. So they go to find her, and basically they kind of draft her into this little paramilitary organization that goes around and saves people. It's very much it's kind of a superheroes type of story. Season 1 was really cool. The cast was really great as an ensemble. The action was fantastic, really great fight scenes. The thing is Charlize Theron is apparently the oldest of the immortals, and she is the greatest warrior of them all. And there are scenes where it's kind of that, she's alone in a room with 12, black ops, military types, and then, you don't see what happens. You just hear it and then you go in and everybody's on the floor bleeding. It was a lot of fun. It left things a bit on a cliffhanger, and I was really excited for the second season. They've filmed the second season, and I don't know what the delay is, but it's still not, they haven't indicated exactly when the release date's going to be, but it appears that it's going to be in late 2024, which we're coming upon rapidly. My guess is more likely it'll be early 2025, but it sounds like they're doing some reshoots and it should be ready to go out. And I think it was just a great show. And when I found out the second season was coming out, I thought that this is a good place to recommend it.
Very nice. And just so you know, there can only be one
Show about immortals.
Oh yeah, that. Although there's alphas, this one. I think there's a couple shows about immortals.
There probably are. There can be only a few. That's the way we say it.
We'll change it. We'll change the expression.
That's going to be the
So much.
tagline. There can only be a handful of people and show. What's your staff pick?
So my staff pick does not necessarily line up with a theme. It's a brand new band. Well, you kind of did, because Immortals sort of lines up with comic books a little bit.
Yeah, but that wasn't the theme.
That's true, but that's your guilty pleasure. So a step removed,
Yeah,
I'll give you a quarter of a point.
that's a completely random point, quarter of a point, because I wasn't even thinking of that.
I'll give you a quarter of an egg burrito. How's it?
That I could, I'll eat a quarter of an egg burrito.
All right, so my staff pick is a fairly local band, a band out of a small town in North Carolina called Concord. And I hope I pronounced their name right. It's two guys, it's their last names, but it's Fox and Veed, V-E-A-D. I assume it's pronounced with a long E. They just released a new album. They've been releasing singles for a while, and I like it quite a bit. So this one is not out of my comfort zone. It's right smack in the middle of my comfort zone. What I did with this album is I started with the third song, which is a song called Too Far Gone. And it's a mid-tempo, gonna leave you song. It's by the time you realize, or by the time you listen to this, I'll be too far gone. That's the main line that goes through. It's a catchy song. I like it a lot. It's not groundbreaking. It's, I feel like Old 60, which happens to be a band that I recommended in a blog, and that they're doing a couple festivals with, I find to be a little bit further in their songwriting. But this is a really solid hard rock country band, country rock. So I guess you could flip those. So I went then to the first song, Through These Eyes, which is that harder edge of them. And I like that. It just brings a real rocking edge to this band. As I was researching who they're touring with, that seems to be a new, not a new area. Of course, it's existed for a while, but more of an edge, more of a harder edge to the country sound, which I think I'm going to enjoy if bands like this are going to exemplify it. The other one that I like is Toxic Love. So when you read the title, you think it's, about being involved in a relationship that's toxic, but it's flipped a little bit in that he's the toxic one and she keeps coming back. So it's her fault. So it's, so he's drunk and high all the time. And she should pretty much know better, but so it's
I love a song that places blame.
Exactly. Especially when, but I don't find it to be, misogynist or anything. I just think it's a nice twist on a fairly cliched theme. So the single that they put out is the last song on the album, Let You Down. And it's a solid song. It's not my favorite on the album, but I think it'll draw an audience. And they're out on tour right now with Cameron Marlowe, who one of us put a song from him on a playlist, and Austin Snell, who I do not know, but I think Austin Snell is the headliner for that one. So I'm gonna listen to him a little bit more, see what I think. He's described as having a little bit of alternative, mix of country, rock, and alternatives, which is quite a bit of stuff to mix together. So I'll see what it's like. So my recommendation then is the new album by the band Fox and Veed.
Cool. Just added to my library. I will listen to it later today. The next segment is playlist picks. Every episode, we each pick a song to add to our season-long playlist. And that playlist gets posted on Spotify, on Apple Music, on YouTube Music, on something else. What else?
Amazon Music, did you say that?
I thought Amazon Music, YouTube Music,
Apple
no,
Music?
Spotify, Apple Music. Yeah, there's like 4 of them. We try to update actually the Friday before the episode drops, so you can try to guess what our theme might be. And for this week, in keeping with our theme, I have picked the song "Cumbersome" from the album American Standard by Seven Mary Three. Came out in 1995. It's not a song I think necessarily you or other people would say, hey, that's a song Tom likes, but it is one of my guilty pleasures. Well, let's face it, they're just a Pearl Jam ripoff band. That song was crazy popular for a very short period of time, and to my knowledge, they disappeared. I think the last time they performed was in the early 2010s, and I'm sure that all they were doing at that point was playing Cumbersome like 5 times and then cashing a check. I don't think they're a great band, but I think that's a great song. At least from my perspective, based upon the other kind of stuff I listen to, I feel it's somewhat of a guilty pleasure. So that'll be my next song on our season 5 playlist for Third Song In.
Good choice. I remember when you were listening to them. So I was torn on this one. This is the first time I've had a longer paragraph than Tom, describing all the various things that I was debating between or among, because it wasn't just 2 things. There's a couple songs that definitely would have made the list if they were actually on any of the streaming services. One was a song called Whatever Happened to Fun by a band called Candy. I remember listening to that song over and over and over again in college.
I can
Found the
remember you
CD.
listened to it.
Yeah. It's not on any streaming services. It's on YouTube. Like you can do a video, but that's not something I can put on a list. And then the other one, and there's a band called Roman Holiday with 2 L's in the holiday. And they had a couple songs that I remember enjoying. One Foot Back in Your Door and Fire Me Up, also on YouTube, but not on any of the streaming services. Very, very poppy, like almost candy pop, like no pun on the other group. But I found it to be, I think I was trying to save myself from going deep into hair metal with some of this more pop stuff, and didn't work. I still went with hair metal. As such, I looked at a couple bands like Tesla and blah, blah, blah. So 86 was a good year for hair metal, if you like hair metal. But I ended up going with the song Missing You by John Waite. I started listening to The Babies, which was his original band. They had stuff in the 70s. Every Time I Think of You, Isn't It Time, or 2 of their big hits. But I chose Missing You because it highlights everything that I would rebel against. It's very, very pop. I looked at it on Spotify. It's had 250 million plays. It has 250 million plays. I remember the video. I almost chose Change, the other song, because that video is drilled into my head where it's like whatever. But Missing You is a really good song. And I bought all the Babies albums, all the John Waite albums up to a certain point, and there were probably about 5 good songs on all those albums combined.
Right.
With Missing You probably being the best. And that was my brand loyalty, despite the fact that I was wasting 1 out of 10 on an album, and I'd be like, this is a great song. Play the rest for me, Chris. No, you don't want to hear this.
Never mind. Wait,
Never mind. But Missing You, I'm debating if I'd turn it down at the stoplight. It'd be pretty close, but it is a very good, very catchy song, and that's my choice for the playlist this week.
Yeah, I had forgotten entirely about that song and that artist, and that just goes to show you that what's a guilty pleasure depends on the person, as much as the art that you're talking about. But I guarantee you, at least maybe until the last 10 years, you would definitely turn that song down at a stoplight. That is so not what you listened to then, and really what you listen to now, for that matter. I can remember, though, loving that song. It came out in 84, right? So right around graduation from high school. And I've said it before, but all of my music knowledge came from FM radio and top 40 radio, and that was played all the time. And I really, really like that song. I know I have that album. I don't have anything else of his, but I have that album only because of that song. But I'm pretty sure even if I pulled up next to you at an intersection yesterday and you were jamming that as research for this, you still might turn it down just in case, if somebody heard you play it.
It'd be just a touch. And then if I saw you, I'd turn on some heavy metal song and crank it as hard as I could.
Exactly. Just bang your head on the steering wheel. Yeah, no, I think both of those are songs we would turn down at an intersection and traffic intersection. So good choices, in my opinion.
I agree. So that brings us to the end of our Guilty Pleasures episode.
Third Song In is recorded in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and Joliet, Illinois. You can email us at thirdsongin@gmail.com. We invite you to send us an email. Tell us what you like, what you don't like about the episode or the podcast in general. Give us your thoughts about guilty pleasures. We welcome any and all input. Please follow us wherever you listen to this podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and YouTube Music. Rate and review us. Give us all your stars. Download us so you can listen to us when you're working out or in the car.
Please check out our website, thirdsonginpodcast.com. We're updating it almost daily with information from the websites, links to the playlists, direct link to the podcast itself, as well as a weekly blog that Tom and I take turns on when we don't have his son Jake step in and save us for a week. You can also contact us via the website, which goes to our email, which is thirdsongin@gmail.com. In fact, I'm looking at the inbox now, and we got an email from one of our most loyal listeners, Liz. She told us not to tell her when to comment. I must have said something. I don't know what I did. But she also acknowledged that she likes the band Old 60, which I highlighted in one of my blogs. So again, check out the website for more information related to the podcast and reach out to us anytime you want.
We also have a Facebook page where you can find links to the website, links to our episodes as they come out, links to the blog. It's also a good way to communicate with us. You've been listening to Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek. Thanks for listening.
You can
website.
Funny, you should be guilty about a lot of stuff you enjoy.
Well, at least that's what my parents told me when I was little, but I didn't go blind and I don't have hair on my palms. Like I said, there's plenty more I can be ashamed of.
Oh, I know.